Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video for theory in my custom chess position called What's Your Decision? This video is going to go over the move 1e3. This move was covered in a previous video, so if you haven't seen that already, you can watch that. But a couple of years ago, I think this was 2023, when I initially did the first theory videos of the position, we explored this interesting move 1e3, and there were several interesting lines, but notably after bishop e2, so white is trying to bring the rook to d3 and take on c3. After rook d1 here, we realized that after bishop b5, black is slightly better in any lines, as this pawn on d5 is a poisoned pawn, so we can't just take the bishop and then take the pawn. But all of this was covered in the previous videos. So the result basically of these previous videos was that this e3 opening was seen more of as a sideline, since black has a pretty good response against it. However, after 1e3, recently I've discovered a new way to play this opening, which I think actually revives the move 1e3, and now it is a viable opening move once again. So I'm excited to show you this. So we have our main line, like b5 can also be played here, but our main line is c5, and then the new move is f4. So after e3 we're playing f4, and d5 we're playing knight d3. So in this opening we're kind of allowing black to take more of the center, and we are having our pawns kind of protecting this d4 square and trying to stop black from playing d4. However, being more solid. However, after knight e6 we play bishop g4, and the main move here is bishop e5. This is the best move for black. After a move like c6, white can play e4. D takes e4 is an interesting move, but I think white might have a slight edge over here. Or after knight a c7, f3, and white is going to have a slight advantage because in these opening positions the computer more prefers black to have a bishop on b5 as opposed to a knight on b5, so white just has a slight advantage because they got their bishop to g4. So if we go back to here, the other move, bishop d7, again after f3 black would have preferred the bishop to be on b5, and actually it wants black to spend a second move and move the bishop to b5 anyways. So after bishop g4, this is all to say that bishop b5 is essentially the best move. So now here comes the interesting part of this opening, which shows it's a very surprising idea that's played in this position, which is why it wasn't discovered until just now. But normally you don't really want to take this knight, because black is just going to open up their queen and bishop, so we normally don't want to do that. But in this particular opening, white actually takes on e6 over here, and after f takes e6 we have g4. So you might be asking, why has white just freed black's queen and bishop? White's queen and bishop are trapped, and because now black's queen and bishop are free, you would think that black is just better here. However, that is not actually the case. And in this particular setup, white has a very solid response and a long-term plan, while if black isn't careful, they can run out of things to do. So the main move here is c6, but a move that might look attractive is rook takes f6, which is not a terrible move, but it's not the most accurate either. And this rook takes f6 is a common idea in the opening, but in this position, after rook takes f6, g takes f6, and queen takes f6 check, we have g5, and the queen drops back to f8. And now it remains to see how white is going to counter essentially the extra material of black that's been freed. So after f3 c6, these are just sample lines, but white brings the knight to g4. And now what's interesting is that these knights are very strong over here. Knight c7, black's bring the pawns in, rook fe1, knight e8 is played over here. So black wants to get the knight into d6. We play knight de5, bishop e7. And you'll note over here that black isn't kind of able to make any further sacrifices or break through. This whole position here is closed. So black is not really able to use their extra material that's being freed very well. So king g3 is just bringing the king to safety, and it's going to allow for pawn pushes in the future. So knight d6, looking to come to f5, but we're not worried about that because our king has an escape square on f2, which is one of the other reasons why we played king g3 here. So h4 is played. Knight f7, black wants to trade off white's very strong white's very strong knights over here. So so we take on f7, bishop takes f7, e4, rook d8, and my comment here is that black can't really do anything over here. They can't really make much progress, so white can make the king more safe and then push their pawns, so white may have better chances here, providing that they're careful. So black has this extra material, but if black were to, for example, take on e4, white can take back, white can also, and just have a better structure in the center. This open file can be contested by white, as well as white can kind of push forward. They can bring their knight in and try to win h7 and promote their pawns. White can also play e5 over here to avoid, or at an earlier time to avoid the trade over here. So e5 is quite a good move over here. And okay, black has these pieces out, but they're all blocked in by their own pawns. So black doesn't really have any plan over here. Meanwhile, white's going to move the king away. For example, they're going to play these moves or bring the king to h2, and then maybe move the knight to f6, have a pawn on g4, h5, and so white is the only side that can make progress here, which is why the computer likes white slightly better here. And at worst, if white doesn't want to try to push through, there's nothing black can do to win this position. And so going back, it's really because white was able to get a knight to g4, but they also had a pawn on g4, and they're able to use this e5 and f6 square to have very strong knights, and black isn't able to break through. Also, this knight defends on h6, so it's hard for black to make any further sacrifice. But in this position, black already sacrificed a rook, so black has extra material, but not enough. And so that's why, because we go into a position where black doesn't really have a move, that's why in many positions, including over here, bishop takes d3 by black is considered by the engine to be the best move. And what bishop takes d3 does is black is sacrificing the bishop for the knight, so they're trading the bishop and knight, but they're freeing white's queen and bishop as well. But the idea is now that the bishop is moved from this b5 square, and this pawn is moved away from the defense of this b3 pawn, so the c2 pawn is moved away from the defense of the b3 pawn. Black is going to have their own pawn promotion ideas, and both sides will be pushing for that. So an example line is c takes d3, d4, bishop c2, knight d5, g3, king b5, bishop f2, knight e7, threatening to checkmate on f5, so e4 is played, a5, and a5. And in a position like this, white has a slight edge. You might ask why white doesn't have a bigger edge, because black sacrificed a rook, meanwhile white did not. But if we look at the position, we see that white's pawns are a little bit held back, and they're in a bit of a defensive structure. If white wanted to break through black's pawns, white would want to move a pawn to h5, but the king's kind of blocking, so it'd be a little bit difficult, and it's also a little bit difficult to push f5. Meanwhile, if we look at black's position, black is going to play, well, I guess they're going to play the king back. Then they're going to play b5 and a4. They could also maybe play c4. So black's pawn promotion, and because of this also this very strong pawn on c3 and just this structure defensive, black has a little bit better structure with the pawns, but they're of course down material because they sacrifice the rook. But what this opening is going to turn into then, it's going to turn into a slow pawn promotion, like a progressive sort of game of pawn promotion, which is quite different from other opening theory we've shown, because both sides have voluntarily freed the opponent's king, queen, and bishop, but now they're going to go forward for pawn promotion ideas. So why this variation for black is better than just not trading the bishop for the knight is because now black has a plan as well as white. So before, black kind of didn't have a plan, but white's pieces were trapped, but black didn't have a plan, and white only had the pawn promotion plan. Now both sides have a pawn promotion plan. So now going back, but black doesn't need to take on f6, and the best move over here is c6. So we saw that the rook taking on f6 wasn't like winning for black or anything, and in the best way to play the position, black also frees white's queen and bishop and is just down a little bit of material. However, they have a stronger structure to push forward with the pawns. So c6 is another try, and this is the best move. Knight g3 is played, knight c7, and then knight e2. So white is going to try to free their queen bishop, and if white's able to get this sacrifice off, first of all, black can't take back because queen's going to take, and then there'll be a checkmate there, as well as black has no like established strong structure like white does over here. So black kind of stops that with d4, and white goes e4. So once white has kind of provoked d4, white's going to go here and try to defend this f6 pawn. They're not in too much of a rush to do it right away, just because that allows knight d5 after e5. Rook cd8 is played, for example, rook cd1, and this is just an example line because several moves can be played. But we see over here that after e5, knight d5, rook fe1, bishop e8, king g3, so white's doing the same thing as in the rook takes f6 variation. They're getting their king to safety, h4, h3, now they drop their king back, and what we see in this position is very similar to what we saw in the rook takes f6 line. Black doesn't really have any sacrifice over here, and the board is completely closed up, so black can do nothing with their extra material. But if we look at this position, white is only slightly better because black hasn't actually sacrificed any material, so black has kind of fully freed the queen and bishop without any sacrifice of material. But what white can do is they can bring their king to, I guess, h1, and they can slowly push forward with their pawns and try to break through in some lines. But because of the evaluation, white is just very slightly better, and it'll be a little bit difficult for white to do this. But once again, just like the rook takes f6 line, white kind of doesn't have black kind of doesn't have any plan in this position, which is why once again a similar theme of this position is if we go back some moves, for example, and this can happen on any move, but if black wants a plan and counter white, black can just take on d3, and what this move does is after c takes d3, it's similar to the other variation where where black can go b5 and try to promote their own pawns. So over here b5 is played. For example, bishop c2, white's getting their pieces freed, king b6, e5, knight d5, rook c1, a5, and these are sample lines right now, but queen c1, so white is protecting this pawn. And then after bishop f7, knight g3, queen g8, and black over here can and white over here can play knight e4 and keep the game more simple, but interesting move is just play f5 right now, and white is protecting this pawn over here. This pawn is protected. F6 is also protected, so, and white can play f4 as well, so this is kind of pushing through. And after a4, we can see this game is quite even and both sides have pawn promotion threats. And you can see there's very little, well, there's not that much theory in this e3 line with f4. It's mainly an idea by white that shows that actually white can voluntarily free black's queen and bishop in a few lines, and then they can use their pieces to gain space, so the other side cannot do anything. And what we saw was with best play from both sides, which I believe this is best play from white and black over here, and it's been analyzed with the engine, both sides end up freeing the opponent's queen and bishop. So now with those pieces freed and the whole board mostly clogged, the idea for both sides is to break through with their pawn promotion. I thought this is a very interesting opening theory to share, because this is unlike any of the other lines I've shown. In other lines, either both sides don't free their queen, or one queen and bishop, or one side frees and the other side is trapped, or both sides free their pieces and the board is open. So it's more, there is pawn promotion ideas, but there's also like tactical threats, but threats for like checkmate or winning material. But over here, the pieces are freed when the board is completely clogged up. So both sides have a lot of pawns remaining, because pawns weren't sacrificed. So because there's so many, it's so closed and there's so many pawns, both sides just push all their pawns for a promotion. And you can see, like in a position like this, white maintains a very small advantage, but both sides are pushing forward for promotion. And this is a little bit different from any opening that we have so far, and this turns kind of into like a pure pawn promotion position. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to show. I just wanted to show the revival of 1e3, which now is shown to be a good opening again, which white can maintain an advantage in all lines through the move f4, and the very surprising move after bishop b5 to take the knight. And surprisingly, black isn't just winning after that, and white can in the long term push their pawns forward for a promotion. And if black wants to have a plan, well, in the main lines we saw that if they didn't take on d3, like the main line where black did not take on f6, but they played c6 instead. If black doesn't take on d3, they're not losing by any means. They're actually should be doing fine. It's just more that black has no plan, and so white can slowly improve their position. And because of that, white is probably favored, but if black wants their own plan, they're going to have to push their pawns for promotion as well. And the only way they can do that is by taking the d3 knight, so that the c2 pawn no longer protects b3, and so that they have a space on b5 to push their pawns forward and hide their king. And both sides just go forward with pawn promotion on either sides, and it's kind of a race to see who can promote first, who can push their pawns through, and really a different type of position. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that. That's pretty much it for this update on the theory. But yet another revelation in the theory for this position. Thank you for watching.